you could actually superimpose the images of that 17-year-old running around with an AR-15, indiscriminately shooting, running around scared, shooting, claiming to offer help, claiming that he could help people. You could show cities that are boarded up and shut down because of the pandemic, all of these scenes, and you could just play Donald Trump's inaugural address about American carnage. And you could actually, at the end of that, understand that Donald Trump was actually right about one thing, that there would be American carnage at the end of his 4 years as president of the United States. And when he gave that speech, crime was at a 50-year low. The economy was in the midst of its largest and longest economic rebound. Had been growing for 6 years straight. And you actually had Americans who believed that if they had pre-existing conditions, they would be able to be treated by doctors. All of that is at risk now. 180,000 people, almost 180,000 people have died. And Donald Trump last night, if you look at the images from last night, Donald Trump showed you again that when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And when Donald Trump showed seniors that he didn't give a damn whether they lived or died in February, that's something they can still believe moving into September. When Donald Trump said America and its seniors didn't have to worry about the pandemic because it was just one person coming in from China in February, well, seniors can bet that he's still telling them he doesn't care whether they live or die when he holds an event like last night, as much as he cares about the stock market. When he says it will magically go away in February, that April will bring its cure, that hydroxychloroquine and disinfectants and UV lights will end this scourge. He's again telling senior citizens from Florida to Arizona, from Colorado to Maine, that he doesn't care about their life as much as he does the S&P. When he ignores his doctors, his White House officials, who warned him that 200,000 Americans, most of them seniors, would die. He told older Americans, by his acts, by his convention, by the scenes we saw last night, that he was less concerned about them dying alone than he was with the Dow Industrial Average. And when he tried to reopen schools last April, when he held super spreader events in Tulsa, and when he packed 1,000 maskless people under the White House lawn last night in an action that nobody else could do in America because it was so dangerous. That was an image that summarized better than anything else that he or anyone else inside or outside of the White House or even on the Biden campaign that could summarize his disregard for common sense, for his own doctor's medical advice, and for the lives of millions of seniors. Almost 180,000 Americans have died. Many more are going to die in the coming months. And when Donald Trump shows you that he doesn't give a damn whether you or your parent are one of those who die over the coming months, believe him. We'll be right back.
We can never have a situation where things are going on as they are today.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.